Millionaire catches little girl stealing bread from kitchen. Instead of calling the police, he did. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. Picture this, a luxurious kitchen, a man in a sharp suit pacing back and forth, and an unexpected noise that would change everything. Inside his grand mansion, David Parker, a self-made millionaire, stood in his pristine kitchen. He was waiting for his personal chef to finish preparing a late-night snack when something caught his attention. He heard a soft rustling sound coming from the pantry, followed by the distinct sound of a cabinet door creaking open. Curiosity piqued, he quietly walked towards the sound, wondering if it was one of the staff members grabbing something to eat. As he peeked around the corner, his eyes landed on a young girl, no older than 8 or 9, standing on a chair, reaching for a loaf of bread. She looked up in shock when she realized she wasn't alone. Her eyes were wide with fear, but there was also an undeniable sense of hunger in her gaze. David stood there, frozen for a moment. His first instinct was to call the authorities, to do what most people would do in this situation. But something about the girl's expression, genuine fear, mixed with embarrassment, stopped him in his tracks. The girl quickly dropped the loaf of bread, her hands trembling. She was caught, but more than that, she seemed lost, desperate. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean to." David felt a pang of sympathy in his chest. His mind raced, torn between what was right and what was easy. He could call the police, punish her, and let the system take care of her. But looking at her small frame and the way her clothes barely fit her, he knew that a harsher punishment wouldn't solve anything. This wasn't a hardened criminal. This was a child who had nothing. He stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're not in trouble." The girl looked up at him, her face full of confusion and surprise. "I won't tell anyone," he continued, glancing down at the bread she had been trying to take. "But if you're hungry, we can find something to eat." The girl hesitated for a moment, before nodding slowly. David offered her a gentle smile, motioning for her to follow him to the dining area. As they sat together at the table, David learned that her name was Lily, and she was living in the neighborhood with her aunt. Her aunt, as it turned out, was struggling to make ends meet, and Lily had taken to sneaking food from homes in the area just to survive. David's heart ached at her story. He couldn't help but think of his own childhood, growing up in a modest house with hardworking parents. His life had changed dramatically, but looking at Lily, he realized just how much his wealth had isolated him from the real struggles people face. Over the course of the evening, David and Lily talked. She didn't have much to say, but her eyes told him everything he needed to know. She wasn't a criminal. She was a child doing what she could to survive. David's thoughts kept racing. What could he do to help her? How could he make sure she never had to steal again? What had started as an unexpected encounter in his kitchen was beginning to feel like something more, a chance for him to make a difference in a life that needed it most. As Lily finished the meal he had prepared for her, David made a decision. He wasn't just going to let this moment slip by. He would find a way to give her a future that didn't involve stealing bread in the middle of the night. And in that moment, he realized that this was the first time in a long while that he had felt truly connected to someone. Someone who wasn't there for his wealth, his status, or his success. Just a child who needed help. By the time the house settled into silence again, David found himself standing in the hallway long after Lily had finished her meal and quietly left through the side gate. He watched her small figure slip into the night, the oversized porch light casting a long shadow behind her. Something inside him tightened, a familiar heaviness he had ignored for years, a kind of loneliness wrapped in echoes of his own past. When he finally returned to his office, the room felt colder than usual. The leather chair, the polished desk, the wall of framed achievements, none of it stirred anything in him. He sat down slowly, rubbing his temples. For many years, he had built an empire, climbed every ladder, doubled every milestone. Yet here he was, thinking more about a hungry child taking bread than his next business deal. He opened his laptop to review the reports waiting for him, but the numbers blurred into meaningless shapes. His mind returned to the sight of Lily standing on a chair, trying to reach that loaf of bread as if it were the only thing in the world she had left. Have you ever seen someone who is trying so hard to survive that it breaks something inside you just to witness it? David leaned back, exhaling long and slow. The house felt too large, too empty. He had never noticed that emptiness before tonight. Memories stirred. He had grown up in a small 2-bedroom home, raised by parents who worked double shifts just to keep food on the table. They taught him dignity, effort, patience. They taught him to give when he could. Somewhere along the way, he had forgotten those lessons. That realization settled on him like a weight he could not shake. He stayed awake for a long time, listening to the hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the soft tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. When dawn finally spilled across the horizon, David still had not slept. Instead, he made coffee and sat at the kitchen island, staring at the loaf of bread Lily had dropped the night before. He reached out, touching the packaging lightly, feeling a strange mix of sadness and purpose wash over him. Later that day, he instructed his staff to take the morning off, claiming he needed quiet to work. In truth, he wanted the house empty so he could think. He walked through every room, observing details he had long taken for granted: the marble floors, the long dining table, the rows of spotless cabinets. All of it suddenly felt excessive. All of it felt like a reminder of how far he had drifted from the world outside his gates. By midday, he found himself driving toward the neighborhood Lily had mentioned. The streets grew narrower, older, more worn. Small houses with peeling paint lined the sidewalks. He slowed when he saw a cluster of children playing with a tired-looking basketball, their laughter echoing through the chilly air. It struck him how close this place was to his mansion, and yet how separate their worlds had become. He parked the car at the end of the street, watching quietly. He wondered which house Lily lived in. He wondered if she was safe, if she had eaten, if she knew he cared enough to look for her. And then came the question that lodged in his mind and refused to leave. Was last night supposed to be a coincidence, or was it a sign that his life was meant to change? As he sat there, gripping the steering wheel, a flicker of movement caught his eye. Lily stepped out of a small, weathered house, holding a backpack that looked far too heavy for her tiny frame. She paused, scanning the street, unaware that David was watching her. In that moment, he made a silent promise to himself. Whatever her story was, whatever her struggles were, he would not let her face them alone. Something was pulling him toward her life, and he was finally ready to answer that pull, even if he did not yet know where it would lead. David spent the next few days thinking about Lily, his thoughts constantly drifting back to the quiet, yet powerful connection they had made. He had meant to do something small, maybe offer her a meal and some advice. But now, he found himself unable to forget her face, the hunger in her eyes, and the innocence that lay behind her desperate actions. He knew he couldn't just walk away. The truth was, he hadn't felt this way in a long time, and it scared him. He had always believed in doing the right thing, but now, for the first time in years, he wasn't sure what the right thing was. He decided to act. He instructed his driver to follow Lily the next morning, to get a better sense of where she lived, to find out if she was safe. David was determined to help her, but he needed to understand her situation fully. After a few hours of waiting, his driver returned with news. Lily lived in a small, run-down house with her aunt, a woman who worked long hours as a waitress to make ends meet. There was no father in the picture, and her mother, according to the driver, had disappeared when Lily was just a baby. David sat in his office, the weight of the information sinking in. This was not just a case of a hungry child. This was a young girl trapped in a cycle of poverty, struggling to survive in a world that seemed to have forgotten her. It was a familiar story, one that reminded David of his own upbringing. His parents had worked tirelessly to provide for him, but their struggles were different, more quiet, more invisible. He realized that in all his years of building his empire, he had never once thought about how his success might help someone like Lily. And that was the moment something inside him shifted. That night, David drove to the neighborhood where Lily lived. His driver dropped him off a few blocks away, and David walked the rest of the way on foot. It was a cold night, the kind where the air feels like it might freeze your breath before it escapes your lungs. The streetlights cast long shadows on the cracked sidewalks, and David could hear the faint sound of children playing in the distance. He found the small house where Lily lived, a modest structure tucked between two others that looked just as weathered. He hesitated for a moment, then knocked on the door. Lily's aunt, a woman in her late 30s, answered, her tired eyes lighting up with surprise when she saw David standing on her doorstep. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked. David took a deep breath and introduced himself. He explained who he was and how he had met Lily a few days before. The woman, wary but polite, invited him in. The house was small, with peeling wallpaper and mismatched furniture, but it was clean. Lily was sitting at the kitchen table, her head down, scribbling something in a notebook. When she looked up and saw David, her eyes widened with shock. "Mr. Parker?" she whispered. "What are you doing here?" David smiled gently. "I wanted to make sure you're okay," he said. "I've been thinking about you a lot, and I want to help." Lily's aunt looked at David, then at her niece, and then back at him. There was a long silence before she spoke. "I don't know what to say," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We've been struggling for so long. I don't know how much help we can accept." David stepped forward, his tone reassuring. "I'm not here to make things more difficult for you. I just want to help Lily. I've seen her potential. She deserves better than this." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I can help her get into a school, maybe find a way for her to pursue her dreams. You don't have to do this alone." Lily's aunt looked at him, her eyes full of emotion, before she nodded slowly. "I've been doing the best I can, but I can't offer her what she needs," she said quietly. David smiled again, this time with more confidence. "Then let me help." Over the next few weeks, David made arrangements for Lily's education, setting up a scholarship fund, and helping her aunt find a better job with the connections he had. He also brought Lily to a local art class, where she could nurture the talent he had seen in her. She was hesitant at first, unsure of what to expect, but soon, she found herself drawn into the world of colors and canvases. Lily's art began to flourish, and so did her confidence. As she worked on her first painting, David couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. It was as if he had finally found something worth fighting for. And in the process, he had found something even more important: a connection, a purpose, and a reminder of the value of family, love, and giving back. As the weeks passed, Lily's life began to change in ways she could never have imagined. Her days were no longer filled with hunger or fear. She was going to school, something she had once thought was out of reach, and each day she spent in art class brought her closer to the dream she had kept hidden for so long. But it wasn't just the schoolwork that kept her going. It was the trust and care David showed her every single day. He wasn't just giving her opportunities, he was believing in her. One afternoon, as Lily was finishing a sketch in the classroom, she noticed a figure standing in the doorway. It was David, watching her with a soft, encouraging smile. She set her pencil down and walked over to him. "How's it going?" he asked, his voice warm. "I'm almost done with this one," she replied, a hint of pride in her voice. David stepped closer to her easel, studying the sketch. It was a simple drawing, a landscape with soft rolling hills and a small house in the distance. But there was something in the way Lily captured the light, the shadows. It was beautiful. "This is incredible, Lily," David said, his eyes genuinely impressed. Lily blushed, looking down at her work. "I'm just trying to make something look real," she said shyly. David smiled, his heart swelling with a mix of admiration and something deeper he hadn't quite identified yet. "You've got something special. You know that, right?" Lily nodded, though a bit uncertain. "I still don't know if I can really make it," she admitted, the doubt creeping into her voice. David's expression softened, and he placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You can. I believe in you, Lily." She looked up at him, and for the first time, she truly believed it too. David had given her more than just the chance to go to school or the freedom to follow her passion. He had given her hope. The next few months were a blur of hard work, growth, and quiet moments of understanding between the two of them. David kept his promise, staying involved in Lily's journey, offering guidance whenever she needed it, and making sure she had everything she needed to succeed. He watched her transform from a shy, uncertain girl into a confident young artist who was beginning to believe in her own potential. But despite all the positive changes, something was still missing. David had been giving so much to Lily, and in the process, he realized that he had never truly taken the time to heal from his own past. He had spent so many years focused on building his empire that he had neglected the one thing that truly mattered, his own heart. One evening, as they sat in the garden behind his mansion, Lily was sketching quietly while David stared at the stars above. He had always found comfort in the quiet night, but tonight felt different. He turned to her, his voice soft. You? No. I've spent my whole life trying to fix things, trying to make everything perfect. But I never realized that I had been leaving the most important part of myself behind. Lily glanced up from her sketchbook, her eyes curious. What do you mean? She asked. David took a deep breath. I've been so focused on success and achievements that I forgot how to really live, how to really connect with people. With you, I'm finally starting to remember what it means to care, to give without expecting anything in return. Lily's eyes softened as she set her pencil down and looked at him. You've helped me more than you know. You've given me a chance to dream again. That's more than anyone has ever done for me. David smiled, his heart feeling lighter. It was then that he realized something important. In helping Lily, he had found something he had been missing all along, a sense of purpose, a connection, and a chance to heal. The more he gave to her, the more he was giving to himself. As the night grew darker, they sat together, silently watching the stars. In that peaceful moment, David made a promise to himself. No matter where life took him, he would never forget what he had learned from Lily. That true wealth wasn't measured by money, but by the relationships we nurture and the lives we touch. It was a lesson he would carry with him forever. As the weeks turned into months, David watched Lily continue to grow, not just as an artist, but as a person. Her talent was undeniable, and the confidence she once lacked was now blooming in every aspect of her life. She had a new sense of purpose, a passion that ignited in her every time she picked up a brush or pencil. David, too, found himself changing. The walls he had so carefully built around his heart began to crack. For the first time in years, he felt connected to something beyond his wealth. He had a sense of fulfillment that could not be measured in bank accounts or business deals. One afternoon, as Lily prepared for an art exhibit she had been invited to showcase her work at, David found himself standing in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie. He was proud of her, no doubt, but there was something more, something deeper, that tugged at him. Lily had invited him to the exhibit, and it was the first time in his life that he felt more excited for someone else than for himself. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from Lily. I'm ready. I don't know what to expect, but I'm so grateful for everything you've done. David smiled as he read the message, his chest swelling with pride. He had helped her get here, but Lily had done the hard work. She had fought for herself, and now she was standing on the edge of something amazing. As the evening of the exhibit approached, David found himself at the gallery, waiting outside for Lily. When she arrived, she looked different, confident, poised, and full of life. She was no longer the girl who had been caught stealing bread from his kitchen. She was an artist, a young woman who had found her voice. You look incredible, David said as she approached. Lily smiled, her cheeks flushing slightly. Thanks. I was nervous, but now, I'm just excited. They entered the gallery together, and as they walked through the space, David couldn't help but marvel at how far she had come. Her paintings were displayed on the walls, each one telling a story of struggle, hope, and transformation. As they moved from one piece to the next, David felt a sense of awe. These weren't just paintings, they were pieces of her soul. You've truly made it, David said, his voice thick with emotion. Lily looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. I couldn't have done it without you. I know I wouldn't be here if you hadn't given me that chance. David shook his head, a soft smile playing on his lips. No, Lily, you did this. You took the chance, and you made it your own. The evening passed in a blur of conversations, handshakes, and congratulations. Lily's work was met with admiration and praise, and it was clear that this was just the beginning of her journey. But as the night drew to a close, and the last guest left the gallery, Lily turned to David. I can't thank you enough, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You've changed my life. David placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression sincere. No, Lily, you changed your life. I just helped you see what was always there. She smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. Still, you helped me believe in myself. And in that moment, David realized something profound. He had always been driven by success, by the need to achieve and to prove himself. But in helping Lily, he had found something far more valuable than any business deal or financial triumph. The joy of seeing someone else succeed, the pride of knowing that his actions had made a difference in another person's life. It was a feeling he had never experienced before, and it was more rewarding than anything he had ever earned. As they left the gallery, Lily stopped for a moment and turned to him. "David, would you like to join me for dinner?" she asked, her voice light but filled with meaning. David looked at her, surprised but pleased. "I'd love to," he said, a smile spreading across his face. They walked out into the cool night air, the city lights twinkling around them. For the first time in a long time, David felt that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The world seemed full of possibility, and he knew that whatever came next, he would face it with Lily by his side, ready to continue their journey together. The following months were a whirlwind of changes for both David and Lily. As her art career began to take off, Lily felt like she was finally living the life she had always dreamed of. She was no longer the scared girl stealing bread in the dark. She was a recognized artist, with gallery shows, commissions, and even some media attention. But despite her growing success, she never lost the humility that had defined her from the start. David, on the other hand, was beginning to feel something shift inside him. He had spent so many years building an empire, but for the first time, he realized that his wealth meant little if it was not shared with others. He had found meaning in Lily's growth, in seeing her flourish and achieve things she never thought possible. But it wasn't just her success that had changed his life. It was the bond they had formed, the trust, the quiet moments of understanding. They were no longer just mentor and student. They were friends. And maybe, just maybe, something more. One evening, after Lily had finished a new painting for an upcoming exhibition, she invited David to her studio. He arrived, as always, with a smile on his face and an eager heart. As she unveiled the painting, David couldn't help but be in awe. It was a striking portrait of a woman standing in a field, the colors vibrant, the expression raw and full of emotion. "It's beautiful," David said, his voice filled with admiration. "It's you," Lily replied softly. David raised an eyebrow, confused. "What do you mean?" "It's you," she repeated, a smile tugging at her lips. "You've helped me see myself for who I really am. I can't thank you enough for that." David stood in silence, the weight of her words sinking in. He had helped her find her voice, but in the process, she had helped him find something too, a purpose he hadn't known he was missing. "You've changed my life too, Lily," he said quietly. "I never realized how much I was missing, until I saw you take a chance on yourself." There was a pause as they both stood there, looking at the painting. In that moment, it felt like everything in David's life had led to this. He wasn't just a millionaire anymore. He was someone who had a real connection with another person, someone who had been part of something much bigger than his business deals and financial success. Lily turned to face him, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and something more, something deeper. "David," she began, her voice soft but determined. "I know we've come a long way, and I don't know where this journey will take us, but I want you to know that I couldn't have done this without you. You made me believe in myself." David's heart skipped a beat. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel the need to guard his emotions, to keep his walls up. "You've done it all yourself, Lily," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm just lucky to have been part of your journey." The words hung in the air, the truth of them sinking in. For so long, David had believed that his success was the only thing that defined him. But now, he realized that it was moments like this, shared with someone he cared about, that gave life its true meaning. As they stood in the studio together, the weight of the past few months seemed to come full circle. They had both been on their own journeys, battling their own demons, but now, they had found something more important than anything else: each other. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. That evening, David drove Lily home, and as they pulled into the driveway, the warmth between them felt undeniable. They didn't say much as they sat in the car, but neither of them needed to. Sometimes, silence was all that was needed to understand that something beautiful was just beginning. The next day, Lily called David to tell him about a new opportunity, a project that would take her work to a new level. As she spoke excitedly about the details, David couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. She was ready to take the world by storm, and he had been there to help her get to this point. But what filled him with the most pride wasn't just her success. It was knowing that their paths had crossed in the first place. As they continued their journey together, David knew that whatever came next, they would face it side by side. And for the first time in his life, that was enough. Months passed, and Lily's career continued to flourish. Her art was now not only recognized locally, but had begun to make waves in the broader art community. David had been by her side through every step of her journey, offering guidance, support, and his unwavering belief in her. But just as Lily's life was taking off, David found himself at a crossroads. The more he watched her succeed, the more he realized how disconnected he still was from his own emotions. The walls he had spent years building around his heart had never fully come down, and as Lily grew more independent, David was left to confront the truth about his own life. He had been hiding from his own feelings for too long. One evening, after a quiet dinner at his place, the two sat on the balcony, watching the city lights twinkle beneath them. Lily had just returned from a successful exhibition in New York, and they were discussing her next big project, a mural that would be displayed in a prominent public space. But David couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. It was not about her, not about the success she had achieved. It was about him. "David, are you okay?" Lily's voice broke through his thoughts. He looked at her, surprised. "Yeah, of course. What?" Lily didn't buy it. She set her wine glass down and looked at him intently. "You've been quiet for a while. I know you, David. Something's on your mind." He paused, feeling a tightness in his chest. He had always been able to hide his emotions, but tonight, it felt impossible to do so. I don't know," he began, his voice quiet. "I've spent so much time helping you, supporting you, and I've never been more proud of you. But somewhere along the way, I've forgotten how to help myself, how to connect with people." Lily's eyes softened, and she moved closer, her hand resting gently on his. "David, you've done more than help me. You've changed my life. But you're right. You need to take care of yourself too." David looked at her, his gaze searching. "I don't know how to do that," he admitted. "I've spent so long building walls around my heart. I don't know what it feels like to let them down." Lily squeezed his hand, offering him a comforting smile. "It's okay, David. It's never too late. You don't have to do it alone." Her words hit him harder than he expected. He had always thought he needed to keep his emotions hidden, to be strong, to be the one who could fix things for everyone else. But Lily's words pierced through the armor he had built around himself, and he realized, for the first time, that maybe he didn't have to carry everything alone. That night, David couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, thinking about Lily's words, about the walls he had spent so long building. He wondered if they had really protected him, or if they had only kept him from living a life full of connection and love. He knew he had to make a choice. He had to decide whether to keep hiding from his emotions or to take the risk of truly opening up. The next morning, David woke up early, feeling a shift inside him. For the first time in a long time, he felt ready to confront his own fears and insecurities. He was tired of being the man who only gave, who hid his emotions behind success. He wanted to be more. He wanted to be whole. That afternoon, David took a walk through the park, something he hadn't done in years. As he strolled, he thought about his past, about his family, about the love he had never truly allowed himself to experience. He realized that everything he had been striving for, his success, his wealth, had been about filling a void that could only be filled with genuine connection. Later that evening, he called Lily. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice steady but full of emotion. "Of course," she replied, sensing the change in his tone. When she arrived, David took a deep breath and faced her, his heart pounding. "Lily," he began, "I want you to know how proud I am of everything you've accomplished. But more than that, I want to thank you for showing me that I don't have to be perfect, that it's okay to let down my walls and be vulnerable. I'm ready to start taking care of myself, to start living fully, the way I've helped you live." Lily smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. "You've already come a long way, David. And you're not alone. We're in this together." In that moment, David realized that the journey wasn't just about his success or Lily's. It was about both of them learning to live without fear, without walls. They were both finding their way, and together, they would create a life filled with connection, love, and endless possibilities. The weeks that followed were filled with new opportunities for both David and Lily, but also with moments of quiet introspection. David had begun to let down the walls he had built around his heart, and it felt like he was living for the first time in years. His work no longer consumed him in the way it had before. Instead, he found himself spending more time with Lily, enjoying the simple moments of life that had always seemed so out of reach. Lily, on the other hand, continued to soar. Her art was now gaining recognition on a national level, and she was invited to participate in larger exhibitions. Despite all her success, she remained grounded, grateful for the chance to chase her dreams. One evening, as they sat together on David's balcony, watching the sun set over the city, Lily turned to him. "David, I've been thinking," she began, her voice soft yet filled with conviction. "I want to do something bigger, something that could make a real difference. I want to give back." David raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the sudden shift in her tone. "What do you mean?" "I want to start a foundation," she said, her eyes bright with determination. "A place where young artists like me can have a safe space to create, learn, and grow. I want to offer the opportunities one never had." David smiled, proud of her vision. "That sounds incredible, Lily. I think you're the perfect person to do something like that." He paused, taking a deep breath. "And I want to help. I've spent my whole life building things for myself, but now I want to help build something for others. Let's make it happen." Over the next few months, David and Lily worked together to bring the foundation to life. With David's business acumen and Lily's artistic vision, they were able to create a space that provided scholarships, mentorships, and resources for aspiring artists from underprivileged backgrounds. The foundation became a beacon of hope for those who had nowhere else to turn, and it quickly gained attention from art communities across the country. But as the foundation grew, so did their connection. They were no longer just partners in a project, they were partners in life. One evening, after a long day of meetings and planning, David and Lily found themselves alone at the foundation's newly opened art gallery. The walls were adorned with the work of young artists who had been helped by the foundation, and the space was filled with the quiet hum of creativity. They stood side by side, taking it all in. "This is amazing," David said, his voice filled with awe. "We did this together." Lily looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. "We did," she agreed, her voice thick with emotion. She paused, then turned to him. "David, I've been thinking. We've come so far, and I feel like we're building something beautiful, not just for others, but for ourselves too." David smiled, his eyes softening. "I agree. I never knew how much I needed something like this until we started." Lily took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. "David, there's something I've been meaning to say. I don't know where this journey is taking us, but I know that I want to take it with you." David's heart skipped a beat, his breath catching in his throat. He had known for a long time that their connection was deeper than just friendship or partnership, but hearing Lily say the words made everything click into place. "Lily," he said softly, stepping closer to her, "I feel the same way. You've made my life so much richer than I ever thought possible. I can't imagine my future without you in it." The moment hung between them, charged with emotion. Slowly, David reached out, taking her hand in his. As their fingers intertwined, it felt like the world around them faded into the background, leaving just the two of them. "So what now?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. David smiled, his gaze never leaving hers. "Now we keep building. Together." As they stood there, hand in hand, surrounded by the art they had worked so hard to create, it became clear to both of them that their journey was far from over. It was only just beginning. With each passing day, they were learning not just about art, but about life, love, and the power of believing in one another. And as they moved forward, they knew that they had found something more valuable than success or fame. Their own version of happiness, built from the ground up, side by side. As the months passed, David and Lily's bond only deepened, and the foundation they had built together continued to grow, bringing hope and opportunities to countless young artists. The work they did together not only changed the lives of others, but also transformed their own lives in ways they never anticipated. One evening, after a particularly successful fundraising event for the foundation, David and Lily found themselves walking through the park, side by side, the cool autumn air wrapping around them. It had been a long night, filled with speeches, handshakes, and more than a few heartfelt conversations with donors and supporters. But now, as they walked in the quiet of the park, everything felt different. "You know, I never imagined that I'd be here," Lily said, her voice soft but filled with sincerity. "Back when I was stealing bread to get by, I never thought I'd be standing here with you, helping so many people. It's like a dream come true." David smiled, looking over at her. I'm glad you're here, he said quietly. But you did this, Lily. You made it happen. I just helped you see it. Lily shook her head, the same humility she had always carried in her voice. No, David, you gave me the chance. You showed me that I had the power to change my life. You made me believe in myself. They walked in silence for a few moments, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the falling leaves. It was a peaceful moment, but David felt a shift inside him. He realized that everything he had achieved in his life, all the success and wealth, meant nothing without the relationships he had formed. He had spent so many years chasing after the wrong things, but now, with Lily by his side, he had found something far more valuable. The quiet peace that filled him now wasn't because of his accomplishments. It was because of the connection they shared, the love that had grown between them over time. Lily, David began, his voice steady. There's something I've been meaning to say for a while. She turned to look at him, her eyes full of warmth and understanding. What is it? She asked, her voice soft. David took a deep breath, his heart beating faster as he looked at the woman who had become so much a part of his life. I've spent my whole life building things, businesses, wealth, success. But none of that means anything without you. You've changed everything for me. I want to be with you, Lily. Not just as partners in this foundation, but as partners in life. Lily's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected him to say those words, but when she looked into his eyes, she saw nothing but sincerity and love. David, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that I want to share it with you. You've given me so much more than I ever could have imagined. I can't picture my life without you. David reached out, gently taking her hand in his. Then let's build our future together, he said, his voice filled with hope. As they stood there, hand in hand, David realized that this was what he had been searching for all along. It wasn't fame, money, or status that made life worth living. It was love, the love they had found in each other, and the life they had built side by side. As the days passed, and their lives continued to unfold, David and Lily knew that they had found something rare, something precious. Together, they would continue to change the world, one artist at a time. But more than that, they would continue to build a life filled with love, connection, and endless possibilities. And as they walked back toward the foundation, their hearts full of dreams for the future, they knew that this was only the beginning. The best was yet to come.